So I've heard about the due on sale clause with a subject to or mirror rep. What is the due on sale clause and is there anything you can do about it?
Yes. The answer is yes. So, due on sale clause. Basically, every mortgage, or most, I think every mortgage, maybe there's some that don't, but most mortgages have a clause that basically says, hey, if you sell the property, we have the right to make the note due, which makes sense. A bank, when they qualify you to get a loan, they're going to figure out all this stuff about you. And they gave you the loan. And so if you give that loan to somebody else, or if someone else is paying that loan, the bank's going to be like, hey, like, look at this. Now, a due on sale is not something a bank has to enforce. They can, or they can choose not to. So it is, but it is something in a creative transaction. It's something to be aware of. It's something to be cautious of, but I don't think it's something to be afraid of either. So there are ways to mitigate the likelihood of a due on sale. I mean, it could just randomly happen to you if you buy a house this way. That could happen. I think most of the time people get a due on sale, there might be reasons. Maybe you missed a payment, maybe your insurance lapsed or changed, and then you got eyes on your transaction. Those could be a reason why it might happen. It could just be random. We've learned there are maybe a couple mortgage companies out there that are maybe more actively looking for this type of transaction than others. But there's also ways, or I wouldn't say around them, but there are ways to fix them. I am not a super expert in them, but I have an idea of a handful of the ways that you can do that. So one of them would be to transfer the deed back to the original owner. So we talked about the deed transferring before, but when you do a creative transaction, the deed transfers to you as the new owner. So that's what might flag a due on sale. So maybe a cure would be to transfer that deed back, and then you continue your transaction as either a lease option where you are making payments that match the underlying mortgage, kind of like a rent to own, but maybe you structure it exactly how that mortgage is. So you still are doing all the things you were doing before. The deed's not in your name. You could move forward with a contract for deed or a land contract, which is where you sell your home, but the deed doesn't transfer until the transaction's complete, meaning you've made all your payments or you've sold the house. So it's kind of like a good example would be when you buy a car and you get a loan. Your title goes to the bank, and the bank holds your title until you pay it off. That's what a contract for deed or a land contract would be. So those might be options that would mitigate or might be a solution for a due on sale. Also, you could sell the house. Obviously, if you buy the house last week and you get a due on sale today, that's not going to work. But if you bought the house and 5, 6 years from now you got one, an option could be to just sell the house. So there are some ways. There are also some resources out there. There's within the subject to community. There's a guy named Caleb Christopher I know deals with these. I think a lot of the good transaction coordinators would also potentially help you, navigate one. I think one misconception that I've heard, we've had a client say this to us when we were working with them, is they thought that if they got a due on sale, it was like, we have to figure this out. Like, it's due today. And it's not the case. With almost anything within the mortgage world, they have to follow very specific guidelines set out by the federal government. And I don't know the exact time frame, but you will have a time frame to cure or fix a due on sale if you were to get one. So it's not something that I would be overly panicked about, but it is something to definitely be aware of and understand, um, or at least understand who could help you if you were to get one.
No, that's great. And I think the due on sale clause is like the big bad boogeyman of creative finance, and everybody thinks this is for sure going to happen to them. But there's a lot of transactions that are done out there creatively, and it's somewhere around 1 to 2% maybe that this happens on, something like that. That's maybe even a high estimate. So doesn't mean it can't happen, doesn't mean it won't happen, but the likelihood is very low. And especially if you use a good transaction coordinator who sets up everything correctly, make sure the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, the likelihood of it happening is reduced. Once again, it doesn't mean it won't happen, but at least you're doing your best to keep it from happening.
Yeah. I think Pace has talked about, like, he owns a lot of creative deals,
Mm-hmm.
like 1 in 500, something I heard. I don't know if that came from him or whatever. And I remember him in a video talking about how he, like, very few people he knows that have got one called, it actually like affected, like they were able to fix it. It wasn't like the end of the road for them. You and I know someone here in Utah who let one. He didn't know what he was doing, and he admits this. He has YouTube videos about it. He lost a lot of money, so it's definitely something to be aware of and understand. But yeah,